Okay, I think we're early because I pushed go live to see if there was another button to push. But so it's 8:17. We'll get started in a little bit. All right, welcome everybody. I have a whole list of questions, and I'll wait to start through the formal questions when we get to 8:30. I thought I'd take a couple minutes first and give you kind of just a general update on what we're up to, and this will be recorded and posted, so we should have it available right after this live stream. So I'm starting a little early. I'm new to this whole entertainment of live streaming, and I've got to change my window so I'm not watching myself talk, which is really annoying. Ooh, that's way better. Excellent. So I'm actually coming to you live today from Cayman Islands. So if the internet disappears, it's not my fault. We are close to the end of the internet here. After you run the wire around Cuba and around Cayman Islands, I'm at a location that's about, I don't know, a mile from the end of the internet, which is kind of a funny way to think about it. But we're here during off season right now, so actually the internet works great. Just down here checking in and getting ready for our services to go live with tokens. We're not quite there yet in all the pieces. We've done our first transactions on the service provider side, and you'll see our first consumer transactions in the near future. We're trying to figure out how to make the experience work really well, not only for the existing token holder, but also for that person who's never heard of crypto and is like, oh my God, what do I do? And so it will be simple to leverage the Rivetz service with hopefully just a credit card transaction. But I want to emphasize that that actually does not mean they're not using a real RBT token. So we're creating a mechanism where RBT tokens will be consumed with real credit card transactions. However, those consumers will have to take a second step if they want to actually get control of the token. So it's not a mechanism to acquire a token per se in a generic way. It's a way to put tokens onto a device account. We're exploring that model. We'll see how well it works out and how people are comfortable with it. It does allow the ability for someone to put a token on a device without the company having to be a money transfer agent in all the different jurisdictions that the service operates. It will still be a better solution if you go and have a wallet that has RBT tokens in it and you use those RBT tokens within your device account. But it'll be interesting to see how it works. We're really trying to explore these new models of what retail looks like for a token operated business, which is more than an interesting challenge, shall I say. So it'll be interesting to see how that is accepted and how services are paid for by individual users on the service. Some of the initial services are starting to become available. You can download and play today with two-factor authenticator. It's live in the Google Play Store. It's still early days. The more we put product out into the market across these platforms, we find little details that we know we still have to fix across operations on different devices. We have tested and coordinated pretty broadly on the Samsung platform, and we've used that from our development perspective. We have not tried to run development through every single device that's possible out there. It's not a simple thing to do. We are, however, testing and qualifying on a range of different platforms today. And we have good support from our partner Trustonic, who provides us with TEOS. They've also been testing across a broad range of platforms in the marketplace. So we expect the service to function pretty broadly across the top tier Android mobile devices. There certainly are brands out there that have their own TE solutions. Things like Google's Pixel does not have a Trustonic solution in it today. as well as uh, um, phones like Huawei's phone. They have their own TEOS. We'd love to have access to their tools and be able to port the solution into Huawei phones for all the great Huawei customers that are out there as well. And there are a number of other sort of interesting brands. Obviously, iOS is something that Apple chooses not to make available any of their security capabilities for third-party developers except through the operating system. We will probably investigate certain aspects of just operating system-based support. But first, I think we'll provide some tools that show you're on a specific device that and what quality of security it actually has in the market. The other interesting piece of business at this point in time, before we sort of get into the core questions, is our relationship with Telefonica, as well as a couple of other carriers in the marketplace. So we are making really strong progress in implementing the technical solution that we're jointly working on around dual roots of trust. And I thought I might just take a second and describe for you what dual roots of trust really means. So when you take your phone, inside your phone, there is obviously the main processor that runs your Android operating system, that protects all of the operations that the operating system does. And it's within that main processor, the trusted execution environment exists. For those who followed us, you may know already, but inside your ARM processor, there's a portion of the processor called ARM Trust Zone. It runs an isolated and execution environment where we can run code that can't be altered by the operating system. And so that trust execution environment comes from the factory, and they're actually keys that are injected into the chips at the factory level that provide the core root of trust for ARM Trust Zone for a specific manufactured device. And so what we do is we gain access to those keys actually through a partnership with Trustonic that allows us to deploy an application into the handset, and Rivetz is then able to run a Rivetz application in the phone. That works today on probably close to 1 billion handsets are supported. That's, Trustonic shipped more than that in the course of the last 4 years. So we like to say sort of half those phones are probably have dead batteries sitting in your top drawer. So there's a 500 to 700 million phone marketplace that's out there that we're addressing today. Excuse me. So the challenge, of course, is in that kind of an ecosystem, if someone in the supply chain makes a mistake, then there's always a risk that your keys could be exposed. Just like, if you go and buy a Trezor and Trezor makes an error in the Trezor device, then your keys could be exposed. And so it would be great to have dual roots of trust so that there's more than one ecosystem protecting your private keys. And so what we've done with Telefonica is we've written an app that runs inside your SIM and deployed within the SIM architecture. Actually, in most of their phones, there's a Gemalto SIM. They're a security company that's been around for many, many years. And so we leverage that supply chain, which also has, when the SIM is manufactured, actually Gemalto generates root keys. They're provided to the carrier. The carrier uses those to turn your phone on and off and to enable access to the device. And so what we've done is we've written an app that runs within the SIM architecture. And so now I have two isolated keys, one from a supply chain from the carrier, one from a supply chain from the trusted execution environment. We combine those together to generate the private key on the device. Now, it's important to note that that private key is ultimately completely in the owner's control. You can back it up, you can recover it to another device, you can write it to a paper wallet. It'll have the full selection of capabilities. So we are not by any means bound to either the manufacturer or the carrier. We're just leveraging their infrastructure to help support the protection of the private key and assure that the services that are delivered cannot be easily compromised by either one or the other supply chain. Dual roots of trust really is a great future solution for consumers. Properly implemented, it's completely invisible. And it should be completely invisible. I think that there are services that consumers will enjoy, like I lose my phone and I can pick up the phone and call my carrier and say, oh my God, I lost my phone, I need a new phone. And in that process of moving that handset to another device, then we have the capability to shut that key off from the carrier, so you can't do transactions until either you recover to a different device or you find your phone, which is always a good thing to do. So we've come to pretty close to the 8:30 time frame. I will go through a list of questions. They're kind of fun. I'll expand on them some. My intent is to provide you a good chunk of time this evening, and certainly happy to address other questions. I will try to pay attention to my Telegram channel at the same time, although there's just me here, so it's always a little complicated when you're trying to operate and talk at the same time. But why don't we get started? So, in no particular order, I think these were sort of chronologically created. One of the questions that was asked is, can we get an update on the SDK? Which partners will roll it out first? How long will integration take for those partners? So the SDK is available out in the marketplace. It's actually part of the download tools that have already been on the Google Play Store. The developer toolkit provides access to what we call a service provider ID, and it's ultimately with that service provider ID that a registered set of keys are created. We actually just lit up the smart contract that will be out there. You can watch it. That will show the financial transactions with the service providers as they go and enable their specific accounts. We're doing something that's kind of fun. The service provider registration takes place with a set of Ethereum public-private keys. It's a smart contract mechanism that initiates your account. That private key is used to handle all of the core administrative functions on a service provider account. We believe that then services can ultimately decide to protect that key in any way they want, from a single key held in a MetaMask wallet to a multi-sig process with 3 keys in different continents, with keys on a multitude of Rivetz-enabled devices. There'll be lots of ways to protect your private key. And so we're supporting, I think, a really interesting mechanism where we're using crypto to create the administrative account. There are no usernames and passwords in that context. We might let you set up with your private keys a username and password combination that allows you to use to have simpler access for simple functions. But if you want to sort of change account parameters, then you're going to need to use your private key. There will be KYC AML performed on everybody who's a service provider who's provided a service provider ID. Which partners are going to roll out first? I think it'll take time for people to develop. My guess is that it will take a few months before we see any third-party services that are rolled out, that have the full service implemented, that are production ready. I think there'll be a bunch of people that are playing with it, that are sampling it. There are customers already with the tools in their hands today, and they're beginning to develop and support interesting ideas across the board. It's one of the reasons why we focused on a few demonstration apps that are in the market, production ready. So the authenticator service is out there. You can play with it. You'll see very soon from us a chat capability, what we call Confirm, which is something we believe can be integrated into really any e-commerce experience. It's really adding e-commerce security to any third-party application, blockchain or non-blockchain. It's the kind of capability that should be added to and supported by 100% of the exchanges. These are the cybersecurity protections and the consumer protections that exchanges should deploy to properly protect your accounts. And so we're comfortable with building those parts and showing them. How do you go from simple 2-factor authentication to an embedded confirmation transaction with your transaction details, all the way to a fully embedded security solution, all the way end to end. So this is the right way to do secure messaging for financial transactions. It is a great application of putting trusted computing to work. These technologies are complex, have been around for a while, and we're really pleased to be at the forefront of showing them working. So the second question is, can we get an update for the Rivetz app. Have you found the bugs, fixed them for the beta version? When will token integration be ready? Understand it may not happen now, just want to know when it could happen. So the authenticator service is out there. Yes, it has a few bugs in it. Yes, we still recommend that you should play with it. If you want to play with it for two-factor authentication to an existing service, please write down all your recovery words, because the app could very well mess up your recovery. The two-factor authentication is being done within the trusted execution fence. It's a pretty secure app at this point. I won't say it's perfect by any means. We've still got some pieces that we're working on the cybersecurity side, and we'll continue to make improvements on that. As the solution becomes more robust, the security aspects become more robust simultaneously. How will a token be used? We've debated this a lot, and we've chosen right now that the two-factor authentication app should be free. It should be in the App Store. Anyone can download it. Anyone can play with it. We believe the primary mechanism that should be added to two-factor authentication for a payment is actually advanced cybersecurity controls. And so what that means is we're going to show you for the first time that you can put a rule or a policy in place around the secret key that is used for your two-factor authentication. And so, for example, you could make a rule that says this two-factor authenticator can only be used in this geo-fenced area. And so what happens is the trust agent in the device goes out to a web service, kind of like an oracle for a smart contract, fetches the geolocation fencing information, and makes a determination as to whether or not that device is in a posture where it's allowed to use that secret key. We can support any range of rules. So it's easy to do things like bind it into the badging system for a building, so the person doing cash management on the bank account can only do a two-factor authentication code when they're currently badged into the building, or check and see in the HR system whether they're an employee. We think there's a very broad array of services where enterprises want provable controls that are actually taking place every time a transaction key is used, and making that part of the policy to determine whether or not the user is allowed to perform that action. This is a capability that can take advantage of smart contract infrastructure. So you can have a key that can only be used if a smart contract satisfied. There's a broad range in approaches. The Rivetz infrastructure will collect a fee for those services when they're used, either as a subscription or even on a per transaction basis. And so in essence, what you have is the first thing you'll see is that as a user of Rivetz, you can deposit money into a device account. This is really value indicated in Rivetz that is stored within your device. Now, what we're doing is actually moving it into device memory. So the device controls access to that number of tokens. This is not your whole store of RVT tokens. We would expect you would give your device an allowance, and that allowance then can be spent. If for any reason there is a compromise of a system or some type of an automated bot that moves money around or any of these kinds of mechanisms, you've really limited your exposure, because you're not going to store 1,000 RVT tokens or 10,000 RVT tokens inside a specific device. We really believe that you'll store a few dollars worth of tokens in a device, and we'll use that for paying for the individual services. All the service providers will be paid in RVT. And so it provides, I think, an easy mechanism where we check out the value into the device, we check it back into the chain, and the smart contract infrastructure to do that is actually well underway at this point in time. So moving on, the third question we have is, can we get an update on that was that question I just answered. What are your criteria for a partner? Anybody wants to download the toolkit and put it to work. I think the opportunity is all service provider partners will have to go through KYC AML. So I think that's an important piece of the puzzle, but not overwhelming. And really, we think people can do interesting things. This technology will allow you to do secured communications. It's a technology that would allow you to store the keys to your Marriott hotel room or the keys to your Ferrari. It would provide you with the mechanism for secure instructions that you could send to any IoT device or any IoT service in the world. It'll have a range of different blockchain-based capabilities within the platform for writing to different blockchains, supporting different protocols. The fundamental capability here is that the user finally can produce a high assurance instruction. And what we mean by a high assurance instruction is it's not authentication, it's not just logging in. It's actually about securing the message and sending that message to the service that's going to digest it. So if you think of all of IoT, it's like sending a message to a light switch and saying, set the lights at 50%. So I think Rivetz plays a very important role in this messaging protocol. One of the things that we've done is when you kind of peel back the onion of a rivet and you look inside it, what really is inside is a table of all the different services that are registered with that specific individual rivet and the keys associated with those services. It's like a little chain inside the rivet. And what we're able to do is when a message comes into the rivet, we're able to look at that message and say, was it signed by a service provider pre-registered with this rivet? If it is, then the rivet will process the message. If it's not, it won't. And so it provides the mechanism for onboarding secure messages into the rivet so the rivet can help create secure messages for all other things. And so in many aspects, we provide a list of APIs or controls that are possible today. You can combine those together in a variety of different ways, but that's how you program a rivet remotely to do the things you want it to do. It is also possible for one rivet to send instructions to another rivet. The whole concept of a protocol that allows secure messaging for a network of rivets to chat with each other and to perform certain functions like, hey, here's half my private key. Will you store it and not tell anybody about it? Those kinds of things are really interesting to take place from within the secure container directly to another secure container. So your collection of devices can talk to each other. Pretty basic protocol. It's been complex to put the parts in place. But now that the parts are in place and we're continuing to refine the capability, it really opens amazing doors as to what's possible. So the next question that was asked is, will Telefonica facilitate the purchase of the Rivetz tokens once the app is native to phones under that carrier? We've had some interesting conversations, not only with Telefonica, but with other carriers about tokens. And I think patience is the right word. I think carriers will ultimately offer a range of different token capabilities in the marketplace and really provide a great solution for services. However, in the early days, we really expect that you should think about the tokens as existing within your device as device money. We'll start with two mechanisms to load tokens onto your device. One is directly within the ERC20 wallet with RVT tokens in the wallet. The existing tokens you have in the form they're at can be used to fund a device. Once they're funded, it basically creates Rivetz tokens inside the device that can be spent. And they can be spent both online and offline. Today, only online, but offline capabilities will happen as well. In addition, and so we'll sort of check in, check out of a chain. It's kind of like a lightning protocol, where in essence, in this case, however, the store of value is held within the rivet. We'll also make it possible to fund a device with just fiat, with a credit card. And when a device is funded with a credit card, those tokens will actually be held on account for that device and then used to compensate individual service providers. So it won't change any of the amount of tokens in the ecosystem or how tokens are circulated. It actually becomes an interesting way to onboard tokens into the device. The difference is if you fund a device with your credit card, then the only thing you can get back is the same amount of dollars you put in. You put $10 in, you spend 5 of them, you can get $5 out in whatever currency you use the credit card for. If you fund with tokens, if you fund out of an RVT wallet, capable wallet, then you put 500 RVT tokens in, you spend 300 tokens, you're going to get the balance of 200 tokens back, regardless of the value of the token on that day. And so by doing it that way, we actually protect the mechanism for this ecosystem to become a money transmitter or money service agent. And we believe we're in compliance with all the basic rules of just funding what feels a lot like an in-game currency at that point for the store of value within the device. It doesn't change the characteristic of the token when it's outside the device and how tokens are used to pay service providers. So it shouldn't alarm anybody in any way, shape, or form. It's an interesting mechanism trying to function within the existing global regulatory framework that's here. It'll be interesting to see how that continues to change going forward as well, because it certainly is not a constant thing. So next question, please, can you ask about the DISC acquisition? I'd like to know the integration is progressing and some of the future plans for DISC, particularly the UK government is planning further trials. Can you shed some light on future plans and targets and what timeframes to roll out a DISC mobile payment solution? So I hope in the course of the next few days, we'll be able to post a couple of videos. We did a fun interview with some of the existing DISC early pilot holders. Just for everybody entertained in blockchain, DISC is a platform that for now over 18 months on a blockchain-based framework has been managing fiat currency-based transactions with basically the customer's bank account or payment account protected by a chain. Started as an Ethereum project. It is now in its final stages of being ported to a Hyperledger project. We have a nice relationship with IBM on that front, who's been helping with some of that work. And so we're excited about where DISC is headed. It has a fantastic foray into the Department of Welfare and Pension. And what fundamentally we're doing is providing a mechanism for those who are under-identified, underbanked, to have access to banking services. One of my favorite quotes in that whole ecosystem is one of our earliest customers is in his late 50s. And his basic comment is, "I'm so excited that my mother doesn't have to cash my check anymore." The concept that when you're in your late 50s, your mother has to cash your check because there are no banking services available to you is really tough. The fact that we were able to give him a mobile app and that in his late 50s was able to operate the mobile app, provides him with instant availability of the information of how much is in his account, the fulfillment is instant, and he's using blockchain, doesn't know it, he's just using a mobile payments app. But he's using blockchain to have a better experience and a safer experience for moving value around in the ecosystem. So we're excited about that project. We have some interesting work that's going on in different parts of the UK to help expand that. Once we're finished with the port to IBM Hyperledger, we expect that in the end of September, end of October timeframe. So in the month of October, we hope to expand the scale, the trial, and really the number of users. And ultimately, in the UK, anybody who wants to is able to say, we'd like to take our benefits this way. So our objective is to get to a position, hopefully by the end of the year, where it can become broadly available. And those who wish to take advantage of a mobile app for their benefits will be able to. So we're excited to be a participant in that. It's great to help people who are underbanked and underserved in this space. We're really providing a next generation experience because of all the tools that come from blockchain and identity and automated KYC and all the parts that come with that to instantiate that process. As part of that work, we are porting the core Rivetz capability in. That will come live at the same time, end of September, October timeframe. That work is already underway. So we're excited about that. It is a full payments app. It does have FCA licensing, and at a sandbox level today out of the UK, we're in the application process for a full FCA license so we can roll it broadly across not only the UK, but the broader European market. It'll provide a peer-to-peer payment capability, and it also helps provide some budgeting capability for fiat currency within those markets. We're looking at how we add blockchain to it so that we can add to the fact that right now it has a credit card on and off ramp. It has a banking account on and off ramp or banking rails on and off ramp. We want to add crypto on and off ramp to it. We think that's a relatively simple process. And so really provide a very universal payment capability compatible with all of Europe and meeting the fundamental PSD2 security requirements well before the 2019 deadline. We would like to demonstrate that we have a payment app that meets all of PSD2 security capabilities prior to the core banks in Europe demonstrating they have an app that does it. It's what these mobile security tools were built for. We think it's a great opportunity to show that blockchain is ahead of conventional banking. So a question about cyber deadbolt. Cyber Deadbolt does an early acquisition for Rivetz, and what Cyber Deadbolt provides is this provable controls framework. So the addition of consumer controls as part of the provable controls. So you kind of have third-party cloud controls, enterprise controls, and consumer controls. And what that means is a user is going to be able to throw their cyber deadbolt, and when they throw their cyber deadbolt, none of their two-factor authentication keys will work in their device. That's just cool. So, like, you left your phone in the Uber, you can throw your cyber deadbolt until the Uber driver shows back up with your phone. And then you can flip the switch on your cyber deadbolt the other way. So all it is adding another attribute or a policy to a key that says you can't use these keys if I've thrown my cyber deadbolt. And the mechanisms for recovery can be pretty varied in the market. From we've demonstrated some voice recovery mechanisms, and as well as just some social encryption mechanisms where my collection of devices, or mom and my sister together, can come together and help me recover my device. Ultimately, all those controls are under the user. It's a selection of user controls. They'll be configured through a web page to support the app and provide a basic mechanism where a cyber deadbolt can be thrown. The consumer will always be able to back up and recover their keys. So if their cyber deadbolt controls are messed up, as long as they have, like mom won't unlock your phone, right? So messed up doesn't mean it's technically messed up. Then you can have a mechanism where you've kept your paper backup or a multiple key backup on multiple devices, and you can go recover your keys. The goal here is to provide a simpler and safer experience for consumers and assure that no one ever loses control of their keys. That's a really important piece of the puzzle. We think as part of Cyber Deadbolt, some of what the carrier does allows you to throw components or have cyber deadbolt controls within the carrier architecture. And so we're exploring what that ultimately means long-term as well. So next question is, I've read a number of times that Rivetz seeks to be blockchain agnostic. Could you explain what that means and why is it important? So Rivetz today has demonstrated solutions both on a modified version of the Bitcoin blockchain. We're doing a lot of work right now on Ethereum. We are building partnerships and relationships with a number of the other protocol chains. And in reality, the fundamental mechanisms of how you create an instruction, how you store it, how we add additional data into the transaction will get supported in a variety of different ways across different chains. So whether you're supporting a machine multisig in order to protect a transaction, which would work with really any chain, or any of the additional alt tokens that are out there in the marketplace, or whether you're actually embedding it within the chain, there's some interesting conversations around how do we modify a chain to store a second hash with every transaction. And so we're exploring a variety of different mechanisms. We don't believe Rivetz needs to produce its own chain. If we did produce our own chain, it would be so that all the Rivetz devices could talk to all the other Rivetz devices, and you could think of 1 million nodes being nodes on a network that provide processing, as the trust execution environment on 1 million nodes could be used and shared that way. We have the basic mechanics of that protocol already built as part of our messaging protocol. It's really just attaching game theory and a little bit of fabric to it. So we might play with that later on just to see what happens. It's kind of an interesting concept of what it means to have 100 million devices that could run everybody's smart contract languages. Is Rivetz open source, and if not, why not? So the pieces of Rivetz that are open source, a number of our developer tool components and some of our sample code is out there and is open sourced. Everybody's allowed to grab it, look at it, play with it, etc. The components that run within the trusted app are not, because we are using licensed software from third parties that don't allow us to be open source. We think it's the right balance. In general, trusted computing is probably more of a certification stack than everybody looking at it trying to figure it out. I think that history can look both directions in this. We have certainly broad-based open source projects that have been discovered to have demonstrated holes in them. And we have closed source, like Intel's chipset that have been demonstrated to have holes in them. I think the right answer at the end of the day for all of this stuff is not really a simple debate between open source and closed source. I actually think it's about identity. I think what's important is that the code that's produced we can certify who produced it, who signed off on it, and how it was produced. And then we attach identity to that so there's responsibility for it. There is no code that runs inside the trusted app component that's not signed. 100% of the objects are signed. If there's an error in that object, it is the responsible for those of us who compile it. And making sure that our supply chain, our partners, our developers, our third-party developers properly included code that was properly vetted and put into a trusted app. And if we make a mistake, you're going to be able to show exactly which devices that version of software is on. We think that's a better model long term. It's kind of like a VIN number in your car. What you want to know is if a car has a problem and I have the same car that somebody else's car is, if they've had a problem with their brakes, then maybe I should go get my brakes checked. And so we think the sunlight in this space around assurance and security is really built around the concept of identity and assuring that the identity and the foundation, the proof that this is a known device in a known condition, actually provides clarity of what that security model really means and proof that it does what it says it's supposed to. So we're focused on that. One of the few companies in the world that's really doing that, doing attestation well. You'll find that most of the infrastructure that we use every day runs on unknown compute. So just a couple more questions here, and then I think there is a couple of questions within the online, so I'll see if I can dig them out. So question number 9 on my list is, there are many projects who are not managing their balance sheet well, and they fail to, and will fail due to the inability to do so. For example, panicking when the price of ETH goes down and selling some of their ICO proceeds at a loss, spending the budget on items that do not drive the business, et cetera. Can you talk about how we're managing the business side of things? How long can Rivetz continue to operate with the current balance sheet, and what factors would cause the company to come under financial stress? So it's a great question. I've been running in basically a startup mode almost my entire life. And there's no question the greatest challenge is making sure that you don't miss payroll, which is a really simple way to saying make sure you don't run out of money. And so it's challenging when the supply of money varies because the value of Ethereum, as an example, varies. I think we've done a reasonably okay job in how we've traded our Ethereum into cash. And, it's really easy for people to say, God, you should have taken all your Ethereum and sold it on this day versus that day. It's great to backseat drive that conversation. It's also important to remember that even though we're a Cayman Islands based organization, we still have taxes due on capital gains on it. So it's been a little tricky how you manage your capital gains and your tax and make sure you reserve your taxes, et cetera. So sport on in that front. It's in the middle of this whole process, certainly the Trump tax laws came in and changed the whole thing. So we have varying tax laws, varying value of currency, and nobody knows at all whether anybody's going to use any of this stuff. So the best focus is to make sure that you have 2 or 3 good paths to execution, and that those paths can run both together and independently. And that's what Rivetz has tried to do. There are businesses where what we're doing, for example, with Disk, is a payments platform in and of itself, by itself. It could easily grow to be a multi-billion-dollar valuation company. We have to execute. It's not a multi-billion-dollar company today. It's a bunch of cool software and a neat app and a few users, and it works, and people are having a good experience, and we'll carry on. The same as two-factor authentication. So most people wouldn't realize that it took $10 billion to produce that 2FA app. It took $10 billion, not a little company with an ICO and a couple of smart people putting together software. In order to produce that, we can go back all the way to the early 1990s. Actually, I ran a team that was involved in the earliest forms of trusted execution in the late 1990s that went on to become part of a French banking project that then educated a whole bunch of people in Europe, who then went on to build the infrastructure around Trustonic, and it helped ARM put ARM Trust Zone into the core design. We were involved in standards bodies conversation in the 2008 timeframe, where people came and said, what should we build into mobile devices for enterprise security? To which the answer was programmability, because nobody knows the answer. And It's all these pieces coming together that ultimately put us in a position where we could write an app that runs standard commercial off the shelf on a Samsung phone that allows you to do two-factor authentication with the private keys and seed keys held within this incredible trusted execution environment. And when you think about that, what makes that interesting is that now for the first time, an individual consumer can go download that application, deploy it on their handset by themselves, and it's interoperable with a few thousand services that support the Oath two-factor authentication capability and protocol that's been pushed and standardized by Google. So that's cool. So at the end of the day, right now, what we're trying to do is provide a set of solutions and capabilities and also provide sort of a belt and suspenders support to market. We have an incredible opportunity with a global carrier. And today we are heads down focused and pushing hard on making that a successful project. We'll see first revenues start to flow, actually, we hope in the next week or so, out of that project and continue to expand. From a timeline perspective, the company has a good-looking picture into 2019, and we will have to show that we end up generating additional revenues. We have a very clean balance sheet. We have a very clean equity structure. So the company has all the right materials to take the next step. We chose, when we did our token sale, not to try and sell $200 million worth of tokens at the time. The goal was to sell a certain amount of tokens, demonstrate we can execute, and demonstrate we can deliver value. And so we'll see how the token side of this business operates and how tokens are operating in the market. Clearly, right now, it's a little interesting. But I think use will be intriguing. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm quite comfortable with where we are, and I'm extremely bullish on the future, both in the short term and the long term. We have the right kind of scale partners and infrastructure to really make a big run at this, and so we'll see. And I would tell you that we're not trying to run around and figure out how we're distracted by our $1 billion venture fund. We can fund other people's ideas. We'd be happy to have those ideas be ones that leverage the Rivetz toolkit. So I think we're in the right place at the right time. Anytime we can help bring another couple 100 million people to crypto, that's our job. That's how we think we deliver value. And that's ultimately what makes crypto move in the market and expand for everybody. The more new eyeballs we bring to this, the more everybody needs to go out and buy a little crypto and put it on their device and use it. Use is the ultimate thing that's going to drive success in this market, or all these projects will fail. I would also say, just in the overall scope of things, that Rivetz is a project that's built around cybersecurity. We don't need the broader crypto market to succeed, to be wildly successful, even with our token. We could just perfectly fine satisfy both mobile security and IoT and have a token-based business that runs within that ecosystem. We aren't dependent on necessarily the success of the price of Ethereum or Bitcoin or others in the marketplace to be broadly successful on a long-term basis. Tokens are like software licensing. It's how we get paid. It's how we manage our business. It's how we run our accounting. And so the Rivetz token is here to stay. It will be used on a long-term basis to provide that accounting mechanism. And we think this discovery of a scarcity that feeds a network effect is a really fantastic business model on a long-term basis. So let's see. I know there's a couple questions that are here. Oh, yes. What plans does Rivetz have when it comes to mainstream adoption? I think more than 90% of ordinary citizens are not aware of the importance of security. You're right. Nobody cares about security. So why Rivetz? Why are we here? Somebody asked me this question the other day, so I'll give you the kind of off the cuff answer. Chalk it up for a little bit of entertainment. Why? Because the internet sucks. Right? We hate using passwords. We can't remember them. They keep changing them every day. We have to download stupid apps that remember all our passwords. Like, didn't we want automation and AI? Like maybe we should apply that to our daily lives. Like maybe our phone could help us log in. Now, it'd be great if there was a reference example for us, even a reference example that would work in a pilot basis. Like, what if we put a SIM chip in every handset in 1994 and the 80 million identity thefts and key frauds went to zero effectively, And the consumer experience improved because we didn't have PIN numbers to make long distance phone calls. I'm old enough to remember. Dial the phone, beep, beep, type in a PIN number, and that's how you connect a long distance phone call. That was annoying. Guess what? Today we just dial the number and push send. Why can't the rest of our internet work like dial the number and push send? Right now we have organizations like Apple and others that are out there that believe that our experience should be the only way you can log on to iTunes is by typing in your username and password from your phone that has a tamper-resistant hardware-based Apple ID. Why? Why is that considered a great experience from the pinnacle of user interface guys at Apple? Really? In order to use the service, you have to type in parental access control? It's amazing. So we think the right model is that security needs to be built in. It needs to be device-centric, not user-centric. That we are users of our devices. Our devices need to work for us and need to deliver that experience. So why are we doing this? We're doing this to make your experience simpler and safer. We just want it to work. It's kind of like airbags. You want them in the car. I actually bought a car once where airbags were optional. It was great. I was just recently married, and I'm sitting at the little table at the dealership, and the guy goes, "So, do you want the optional $300 passenger side airbag?" Like, your wife is sitting next to you. You just got married, and you're like, "Yeah, of course I would like the optional passenger side airbag." Right? Security needs to be built in. Consumers don't expect to have to pay for security. What they do and are willing to pay for is control. And so security is not the thing you buy. Control is what you want to buy. And quality of experience. So nobody thinks of, gee, I bought a cable box with greater security in it, and it's going to enhance my life. No, I just want the new box that gets pay-per-view or automatically shares the video from room to room. Like, that's a fantastic idea. Guess how they do that? With security. So nobody buys a cable box because of security, but they love the features that come when security is properly added to a cable box. So, and even if they are willing to buy security, they will not change their behavior nevertheless. Just look at WhatsApp and Facebook user base to understand what I mean. This is funny. We in the security industry spent years discussing the fact that in content-based control with digital rights management and proper encryption and all this kind of stuff, no consumer is ever going to be interested in it because they do not want to. And then this bunch of little kids got together and they announced this little app called Snapchat. And you know what? The snaps were supposed to go away after 30 seconds. And they knocked it out of the park. Oh, you mean the kids do want content-based control with world-class digital rights management that makes your snaps go away after 30 seconds. So security was a feature that launched Snapchat. Now let's all agree that the security wasn't very good. It wasn't actually very good at all. Actually, they got shut down by the Federal Trade Commission for lying about the fact that the snaps go away, and they're not allowed to say that for 10 years. Cool. So a little bit more security for Snapchat would have been a great plan. And actually today, Snapchat's valuation is probably limited because the snaps don't really go away. Snapchat could have broadened out into the medical industry for prescription data sent to your phone where the snaps really go away. So I appreciate the concept of WhatsApp and Facebook and that the Facebook user base owns the world. I would argue the Facebook user base is like 1970s advertising television. It's an ad-supported economic model. We have not transitioned to a subscriber-based economic model. They might pivot with blockchain. They might not. It's hard to tell. There certainly are plenty of examples in history of companies that have failed to transition to the next level. There's this little company called Google doing search. It came in at the end of the search thing when search was considered mature and done and owned by Yahoo and Alta Vista and all these other guys. And they got their lunch eaten by a new economic model driven by Google. It was not because the search was better. It was because the underlying economic model of Google made people money. And so the question is, do we believe? Do we believe that the addition of blockchain and crypto in its broad set of mechanisms and with the need for truly thousands of keys, how we're going to manage the subscriber relationship? Where are we going to put all the keys? Where's our cable box for blockchain? Where's the thing that helps us to manage and operate all of these chains? I think the idea of helping carriers participate in that process is something they're very good at. They've helped us to connect to and manage access to consumers across the entire ecosystem for internet. Like, remember dial up? And then some idiot came and sold you DSL, and now they're selling you fiber to your house. Who could even imagine you needed 100 megabits per second? How can you even imagine not having 100 megabits per second? So we're sitting here talking on 100 megabits per second. It's fantastic. Actually, it's not. We're on like relatively lousy DSL at the end of the island. But it seems to work. And so the concept that we need to provide the tools to help manage and operate chains, I think, is a very important piece of the puzzle. A next question, and I think I'm getting to the end of the questions that are here. What are your plans as far as expanding to other platforms aside from ETH? It's a great question. I don't know what the right answer is there yet. I think in the short term, the Ethereum token is providing us with the right store of value for our users to hold tokens and to operate. It's clearly mainstream. It works pretty well. For what we need in transaction volumes, it's perfectly fine. We instantaneously turn it, in essence, to a Rivetz token. And you're like, okay, where's the blockchain for the Rivetz token? It's not. It's a trusted computing token. It's a store of value within the device. This is not new to us. We were doing store of value in a hardware device in 1995 and 96 at my previous company. We could tell you bullets in the open source version of Doom in 1996, 97 at 1/10,000th of a cent a bullet offline in silicon with secure time. So we know how to do this. And it's interesting when you mix trusted computing and blockchain. We have a whole nother set of tools and toys to play with. You should really think of the trusted execution environment almost as a smart contract. In essence, what we're doing with policies and rules looks a lot like an Oracle service for a device. So it's kind of a fascinating model as to what, how these pieces actually might plug together long term, for at least the foreseeable future. Let's call it the medium term. I don't see us moving off of an ERC20 token. We might need to move forward to the, the newer protocols within Ethereum, just because I think they give us some features that make the consumer experience simpler. So what about offering mobile phone contracts via carriers that include a monthly amount of RVT beside the usual phone flat, SMS flat, internet flat? Yeah, that'd be great. Actually, we've explored a variety of different conversations when it comes to the global roaming and carrier billing systems. So I would just say, hang on to your hat and stay tuned. It might be fascinating to figure out what a device money in an IoT architecture with carrier back office infrastructure could really do. The carriers are adding blockchains into the core of their network, so that's interesting to watch. When you mix what we're doing and what they're doing, I think there's just all I can say is I've been doing this for a long time, and there's some of the conversations we're having that are just crazy as to what's really possible in the marketplace. Not with an amazing amount of work, just with kind of taking 30-year-old systems and updating them a little bit. So it'll be kind of a fascinating space. You know, IoT is some question just came through, and Ethereum's classics focus on IoT might be a good fit. You know, IoT is interesting. What is IoT? Some people thought about the network of all these things and whatever. I think of it a little differently. PC networking is based on ports and passwords. You plug into this port, you supply that password, you can get access to these services. Mobile, by the way, most of the apps you have in your phone are not mobile. They're actually predate PC networking. They're really based on username and password, copying the CompuServe model. Most mobile apps, if you just give me your username and password, I can go to any terminal, any mobile phone, type in your stupid username and password, and I'm you. That's a problem. It's CompuServe architecture model. So once we go away from the VT100 CompuServe model, we get to PC networking, which is really, I plug into this port, and so I have firewalls and security as part of that port that give me access to, like, I can only print if I'm plugged into this port on the wall or hooked to this Wi-Fi hotspot. Mobile is really a world where services are delivered based on the identity of the device. It's an authentication protocol. All you need is authentication. And it's authentication and end-to-end connection. So it's kind of like authentication with SSL is a mobile architecture, but it's device authentication, not user authentication. IoT is device authentication, but it's really not authentication. It's really device encrypted messaging. So IoT and blockchain are kind of the same thing. IoT and nuclear launch codes are kind of the same thing. It's an encrypted message. When you receive the encrypted message, you're supposed to follow the instructions if the keys match. Sort of think, hunt for Red October kind of nuclear messaging, right? It's like, hey, we got a new emergency action message. Check the signatures. And if they say shoot the missiles, shoot the missiles. Right? Of course, the trust system in Hunt for Red October wasn't working very well because the people kept discussing whether or not they should execute it. You really want a good trust system that just follows the instructions. So it's interesting to think about what the future is in a secure messaging-based protocol with blockchain as a primary mechanism to do that. The problem with blockchain, and I've said this many times in many presentations, but it's an important thing to continuously remember. We're missing one of the keys. So in blockchain, while the data in the record is immutable, I have no knowledge as to the quality of the system that wrote the record. What Rivetz is doing with trusted execution is adding that attestation, that health and integrity, these external policies and controls, this proof that this transaction on this chain was written by this device in this condition. That's what's super important. That's what changes the entire crypto space. Rivetz is how you add quality to the data stored on all chains. So when IoTs are feeding information to Oracle, security and attestation becomes paramount. So let me give you an example. In order to deliver an instruction to a smart contract, the instruction has to be signed by the private key. That's the basics. So inside that instruction, I could include Oracle data. The problem, of course, is how do I know that Oracle data hasn't been changed when the Oracle data was provided? With a trust agent, I have a third-party observer in the form of the trust agent. So the trust agent could, for example, create a nonce, send it to an Oracle, say, hey, sign this, and include this nonce in it. So now when it comes back to me, I can include that data with my smart contract claim all the way up, and what's delivered at the other end actually has embedded within the instruction not only the smart contract or the Oracle data with a random number in it, a nonce, but that nonce was independently signed and provided by the Rivetz device at the same time. So now I can assure the data delivered to any smart contract came from an authoritative source according to the owner of the device. That's cool. By the way, that applies to 100% of all smart contract infrastructure if you want to assure that the data it's acting on is real data. So trusted computing will play a job and play a role in facilitating the quality and security of these different pieces. Do you have to have it? No. But if somebody spent $10 billion or more figuring out how to make some of these pieces work and giving them names and giving them tools, things you don't know, things like endorsement keys and provable migratable keys and platform configuration registers and the security work, these are the things we're trying to put to actual work. After truly billions of dollars has been spent and put to work in this space. We'll see if we make the consumer's life simpler and safer, giving them a great security experience where security is designed in and built in from the ground up day one, where there's redundancy in the protection of the keys, and the quality of the information, the quality of the output, the chain, smart contracts, and infrastructure is higher, thereby making it possible to have a more valuable subscriber on the network. So if we do our job right, users will have a better experience. They'll be happier. The internet might suck a little. And the value of that subscriber will improve. So I just got a note came in that said vulnerabilities of a T. There are many. The T is a piece of software that runs in an isolated execution environment that's signed and measured. It is certainly higher assurance just run on your operating system. On the other hand, it has lots of risks associated with it. People can make mistakes. What fundamentally is possible is that within the context of the T, if a mistake is made, when it's detected, we will know all of the systems that have that vulnerability. So if you have a model 5.3.1 ARM processor running this version of code on it, you can go look at that and you can determine whether you have a vulnerability. What we're trying to do in our project with Telefonica as a carrier is dramatically reduce that vulnerability. There was work that was done in the late 2000s by NSA on commercial solutions applied to classified networks, where basically they determined that they funded the research where the math showed that you could multiply the risk factors. So if you had a 10%, a 0.1% system A and a 0.1% risk on system B, you multiplied those risks. So it was a 0.001 risk on the combined system. And so that concept was, basically take a Juniper VPN and run it with not another copy of Juniper, but run it at the same time with a Cisco VPN, or use BitLocker security combined with self-encrypting drives, and you'll have a better encryption solution on a laptop. And so we're trying to take those principles that I think were well researched and well studied and apply them in this context where we can take and protect keys on the carrier infrastructure, keys within the trusted execution environment. So if you have a vulnerability in one or the other, you have a potential for the best solution. Certainly, we're going to build solutions that only run on the T. I don't know that we'll build solutions that only run on the SIM. There's not a lot of horsepower in the SIM. And we may ultimately build solutions that only run in the secure OS. I mean, our mission at the end of the day is to support the platforms that are available in the marketplace. We're starting within the T. That's where we're building a brand. But we'll extend out to the other platforms. What we'll do, though, is tell the user the risks that are associated with using those platforms. So we'll begin to explore this. You'll see a fun feature in our chat app where when you're chatting with the other person, they'll tell you what kind of phone. Oh, they have a phone that doesn't have the security turned on. You might not want to really trust those messages very much. Who knows what they came from? Anybody who's in this business invested or participated in crypto knows that one of the hardest things to do is to send you a crypto address and have you trust that it's real. That's crazy after 30 years that we can't send an assurance. Rivetz is here to help solve those, send you a message where you can trust. So with that, I've been sitting here talking for an hour. So I really will have to listen to this again. Hopefully it was helpful. Really always happy to talk about what we're trying to do. The technology of this is amazing and fun and does really cool things. And we have some great partners that from one end of the spectrum to the other, from interesting government applications all the way to how do I protect a consumer? How do we put these technologies to work, provide every future? This technology should be fun, be easy, and should be cool to use. And at the same time, let's hope it helps us in assuring that all the devices that run all of our critical infrastructure in the world are known devices running known code. And that's what we're trying to achieve. So if at the end of the day, all we've done is we've proven to people that these technologies can be put to work, and we wake up tomorrow and others have put it to work in a way that's made us all safer, we accomplished our job as well. We're playing our role in this space. We're not trying to solve all the problems of the world. We're trying to give a real world, simple example of truly putting real, honest to God hardware security to work and helping provide you with a safer and simpler experience in the future. So with that, thank you very much, and appreciate everybody's support. We wouldn't have a project here at Rivetz without everybody's support, and we look forward to bringing you great solutions in the marketplace. Thanks.